This is Captain Olimar of Hockatate Fright from Planet Hockatate. My ship, the SS Dolphin, has crash landed on an unknown planet. It appears I had been hit by a meteor on return course to Hockatate. I can attempt to rebuild my ship, but many of my parts have gone missing. I fear the worst. Today I came across a small red creature. It appears bipedal and has a small plant leaf emerging from its head. It sprouted after I inspected a red bulb that sprang up into a UFO. I decided to name the small creature Pikmin, after the Pick brand carrots back home. I'll call the UFO an onion. My observations showed that Pikmin will bring nutrients home back to their onion in order to sprout and grow more Pikmin. They all listen to whatever direction I gave, regardless of my naivete. Do they see me as an alpha? Have I imprinted on them? I only have 29 days left until my life support systems expire. Maybe I can use these small creatures to gather enough parts in order for me to return home. Only time will prove if I'm up to the challenge. And, well, welcome to Pikmin.
Years before Mario Sunshine was released, Nintendo showed off a tech demo of something called Super Mario 128. It wasn't anything of note, just a tech demo of many Mario running around in a small physics engine. It never turned into any Mario game, and when Miyamoto brought the demo up once again, he revealed that we've already played it. In an interview with Shigeru Miyamoto, Shigefumi Hino, Masamichi Abe, and Colin Reed, they discussed the development of the first game. It was initially created as a game called Adam and Eve. It was basically a simulator kind of game where you watch two people interact and sometimes play God. The characters would live their lives based on your decisions. Maybe they make a nest and have children. But they didn't have a goal in the game yet. Eventually, they kind of started playing around with the 100 Mario's tech demo ideas, as well as new technology like the C-Stick and better AI that was coming with the GameCube. And well, a few things started to stick.
Ladies and gentlemen, Shigeru Miyamoto.
Let me introduce you to our new baby. Like all babies, it is small, but it will make a lot of noise.
Released in 2001 for the Nintendo GameCube, Pikmin is a magical little real-time strategy game straight from the hands of Shigeru Miyamoto himself. Your goal as Captain Olimar is to gather as many ship parts as possible in order to leave the unknown planet you've crash-landed onto, lest your life support expires and you perish on the unknown planet. The first area, the impact site, serves as our training ground and tutorial. You'll find red Pikmin here. These little guys are the best at dealing damage and are immune to fire. The first time you arrive, the day will not progress whatsoever, giving the player as much time as they need. The next time you arrive, there will be a second part to collect, as well as more enemies to fight and grind for more Pikmin. It's a good idea to come by here if you're low on your personal army. The second area, the Forest of Hope, is where the game picks up fast. You'll quickly realize that the day will be over in no time if you don't get moving. With the game's main challenge being time and resource management, you'll need to figure out how to get as much as you can done possible within each day, while still getting all your ship parts by the time 30 days have passed. I tried to keep a rule of getting at least 2 pieces each day. Mind you, I couldn't always do this, so I tried to have at least a second piece in a much more obtainable position than the previous day. So the Forest of Hope is home to the yellow Pikmin. Their ability is simply that they can be thrown at greater height as well as carry bomb rocks, which I'm sure I won't get carried away with and blow up my own squad at some point. The Forest of Hope will also be your first introduction to enemies, specifically the Bulborb. I remember being freaked out by these guys when I saw the demo for this game as a kid. These massive beasts will ferociously scarf down your horde of Pikmin with no trouble at all. However, if you gather a sizable army of reds, the Bulborbs will be no match if you strike from behind. These monsters won't really be anything in comparison to your other foes, and many bosses like the burrowing Snagret will be quite challenging, and even if you're making top pace, you'll be unable to gather all the ship pieces on your first visit.
Oh, hello. I'm Steven Seagal Olimar. I've been out here on this planet for a while. We crash-landed, and there doesn't seem to be any sign of intelligent life anywhere. But I have found these curious creatures. I haven't decided what to call them yet, but I'm thinking Twiggy Boys.
You should call them Pikmin!
No. I'm going to call them Pikmin, a name I just came up with. Yes. What? Hey! Where are you going? Bring back my camera, you bread thing! Every time.
Personally, I found the next chapter the most challenging. The Forest Navel is home to our newest friend, the Blue Pikmin. The Blue Pikmin are able to travel through water, where other Pikmin would all normally drown. Stop drowning, get out of the water, stop, step out, leave, water! At this point, the game will test your ability to shuffle Pikmin around to achieve certain goals, either managing the field or returning to base to exchange your horde completely. You'll need to travel through fire enemies like the fiery blowhog and, well, fire in general, with your red Pikmin, or use yellow Pikmin to obtain outer reach ship parts so your reds can carry it through the fire. You'll also notice that there are more enemies that carry loose ship parts as well. As usual, the boss creatures will carry parts, but so will the seemingly unsuspicious enemies like the bread bug. I ran around and had to restart the day more than once to make efficient use of my time once I realized this little jerk had my space float. So, since you have all 3 Pikmin, now is a good time as any to go and revisit previous areas as well as grind up a stock of Pikmin back at the impact site. The final area of the game will be the Distant Spring. Oh boy, is this the final test for your adventure. You'll need to make efficient use of all your Pikmin and shuffle them accordingly. Honestly, I feel like some of these parts are placed with mostly red and blue Pikmin in mind. That doesn't mean they won't have you put your yellows to work as well. This piece way over here wants you to turn your Pikmin into yellows, then throw them across the water, up the ledge. Then back in the blues so you can carry the part back home. Honestly though, what I didn't really care for about this stage was this random puffy blowhog. The one way over in the water has an item, but not the normal ones on land. So I didn't pay any mind until I tried murdering everything in the land. I don't mind if boss enemies have items, but don't include them as 3 large enemies scattered in the map. It kinda ruins the discovery. Anyways, the final challenge of this map will be the Smoky Prog. It appears any day before and including the 15th day. All you have to do is walk up to the egg, it will hatch, and you can initiate the... Oh no. No! The Smoky Prog will poison and kill many of your Pikmin. The Prog will kill rooted Pikmin and will take out many of your army in the process. The reward will be a pearl, which you can feed to an onion for 100 new Pikmin. Not a bad reward, but hardly worth the slaughter.
As night falls, the Pikmin return to their nest to rest for another day of hard work. Hang in there, little guys. Pikmin. Only for Nintendo GameCube. Rated E for everyone.
The final part lies elsewhere. You must travel to the final trial and finish one more puzzle. Once reached, you can take on the final boss, Emperor Bulbax. The game intends for you to take the yellow Pikmin and use them to throw bomb rocks into its gaping maw, but I messed it up immediately. So I just sent hordes of red Pikmin to their doom until the beast fell. I'm not proud of my war crimes. Now that Olimar has obtained the last of his ship parts, we're free to depart. Our Pikmin immediately begin to fend for themselves as we leave. Hopefully they're better off without us. As we ascend into the atmosphere, we see many different colors of onions float up into the sky as well, implying that there must be even more Pikmin to discover on this planet. The game leaves us with one final stat screen, our time proportional to how many ship pieces we've obtained, as well as our numbers of sprouted and fallen Pikmin. The game is more fun to replay on repeat occasions, such as trying to finish in a more efficient time, or through challenge mode. Challenge mode is a test as to see how many Pikmin you can sprout in a single day for each and every level. It's a very fun way to get more value out of the game, but I wish there were some options to randomize some item locations for a little bit more variety maybe for the main game. For this game I played on the Nintendo Wii version, the copy of Pikmin that boldly reads "New Play Control" on the front cover. Basically the big difference with this game is that it supports the Wii remote pointer. And while I know a lot of people don't care for motion control, it really is only pointer controls, no waggling to be found. I've not played the original version, but based on the footage I've seen, I kind of feel this version just plays better in general. At least that's what I've heard through consensus. Additionally, this game also supports 16:9, which I think is usually a welcome improvement. Both Pikmin 1 and 2 were given a Wii release, and honestly they're easier to find than the GameCube prints, so it's kinda just a better overall to get those versions. Also, the Wii Remote plays little sound cues when you interact with your Pikmin. It's probably the best instance of the Wii Remote using the speakers in any game. I absolutely recommend playing Pikmin 1. It's an extremely fun game that has held up very well over the last 2 decades. Honestly, you should have no issue finding a copy if you want to try this game yourself. If you can't get a copy for the GameCube or preferably the Wii, you can always purchase the game or the second one on the Wii U eShop. At least, assuming the shop is still available in the next few years. And with our next chapter, generally game sequels improve on the original tenfold. And while films often cannot follow this rule whatsoever, will Pikmin 2 be a worthy successor?
This is worth like 35 Pokos. Bud Light. My favorite. Yes. I think it was worth it coming out here after all.
赤ピクミンは火に強い。青ピクミンは溺れない。黄ピクミンは高く飛ぶ。紫ピクミン力持ち。白ピクミンには毒がある。
Now, a lot of Pikmin 1 was actually pretty short. The nature of the game encouraged you to finish within 30 in-game days, with about 15 minutes each day. The game wants you to be efficient, practical, and resourceful to get the best possible score within the least amount of time. Pikmin 2 completely flips that on its head and is played very differently. It's not bad, but I didn't find it as fun of an experience. Since, in the end, it took me well over 30 in-game hours to complete. So Pikmin 2 takes place immediately after Olimar has returned to Planet Hocketate. Apparently your coworker, Louis, lost a shipment of golden pick carrots to some monsters. Now the company is in a massive debt. The company president has noticed that the ship has valued the souvenir Olimar's brought back at 100 Pokos, which is apparently more than a year's worth salary. Very concerning for a bottle cap to be worth that much, but I digress. Now you and Louis have returned to the distant planet to search for treasure and save the company. You'll collect anything from desserts, fossils, soda cans, to even Duracell batteries. That's right, this game has a heavy amount of product placement. A lot of the bottle caps you find will be branded for a known soda company, such as 7-Up or even a Valsic Pickles lid. Here you can see a direct comparison of a Duracell battery in the USA release and in the Japanese release. And honestly, I really don't like treasures like these in my children's game Nintendo. Now obviously this array of treasures makes it very clear this planet was once current day Earth. Heck, it couldn't be more clear since we very quickly collect 2 parts of a small globe. But I honestly prefer the subtle nods in the first game to the blatant representation in the second game. And with this, Pikmin 2 is no longer about collecting a set amount of items within a time frame. It's about collecting lots and lots of treasure. You do not have a day limit, and I wasn't finished until day 57. What this game wants you to do is come to one of 4 overworlds. Search for holes in the ground, all of which will lead to randomized dungeons. Now honestly, this gimmick is not very well fleshed out. The dungeons are extremely similar in design and don't really feel that randomized. Most of the floors follow a basic scheme that turn to a few parts just rotated around each time you visit that floor. And you will be visiting dungeons several times to collect all the treasures. Most of them, especially the late game dungeons, will involve you exhausting your army of Pikmin before you can even reach the end of a dungeon. I very often had to make several trips into a dungeon because I encountered a new enemy or mechanic that I wasn't ready for. And more to that point, most of these dungeons are purely fighting. In fact, so is the overworld. I can recall 2 or 3 instances where I solved some kind of puzzle to get a treasure on the overworld, but the rest of the game is just combat. And on top of that, I spent so much time in the dungeons because I didn't know you could just go right to the floor exit with my Pikmin. I thought I needed my whole troop with me the entire time in order to not leave them behind. This is the main reason I lost so many Pikmin. I was fighting tons of enemies and managing obstacles I had no reason to engage. Anyways, new to Pikmin 2 is 2 new Pikmin types that are only found through candy pop buds in dungeons. The white Pikmin, who is faster, immune to poison, and is able to dig up underground treasure, which usually results in me returning because I didn't have any white Pikmin to help me dig, but my radar was going off very loudly, and purple Pikmin. They're able to lift heavier objects and are able to stun enemies when thrown. Honestly, it's pretty underutilized how many times your Pikmin needs to carry things larger than 100 Pikmin strength. I can count about 3 times off the top of my head. But I do think the barbell, or doomsday apparatus, requiring the strength of 100 purple Pikmin is a fun touch. Oh, you'll also sometimes come across a bulbmin. Apparently, these little guys are infected with a parasitic type of Pikmin. They're a good way to grab a small amount of temporary Pikmin that will function like the others while you're in that dungeon. I found them quite useful as they're also immune to water, poison, fire, and electricity. They can also be converted into other types of Pikmin at the candy pop buds, making for an effective way to leave the dungeon with your free Pikmin. Of course, you'll be fighting through tons of enemies on your way out. Specifically, each dungeon has a boss monster. These monsters will generally have a new treasure for your Poco total, and they will often give Olimar and Louis some kind of upgrade, such as element resistance, movement speed, a light, or even the ability to uproot Pikmin with your whistle. The whistle upgrades in this game have the most overall benefit, and I'm glad they're here. And oh boy, getting Pikmin is such a pain. Grinding in the first game is extremely easy, but here it's more of a chore. Basically because killing enemies in this game doesn't always equal more Pikmin because you're in dungeons. You can't sprout new Pikmin in dungeons. You're going to need to revisit several overworlds a few times in order to refill your stock of Pikmin. In fact, get ready to visit the Awakening Wood plenty of times because this is the best way to gather up ultra spicy berries from a burgeoning spiderwort. I actually really love how these work. When you gather up 10 of them, your ship will give you some ultra spicy spray, which will power up your Pikmin, causing them to do more damage. At some point the game gives you some for free, so I finally decided to try using a boost before a boss fight. Oh, I completely forgot to mention that you're able to make use of your partner Louie. With a simple button press, you can switch captains with ease. I really didn't use this function much. Apparently he's good for switching during combat with different Pikmin, but my playstyle really didn't encourage that ability. The most I ever got out of the partner system is leaving Louie and the Pikmin at the base, then having Olimar check on what kind of Pikmin I need for the dungeon I'm attempting, then switching back to Louie to bring over the troops. Once you reach enough treasure, you'll be happy to leave the planet and return home to a rich and well-off company. Unfortunately, we've managed to lose Louie on the way out and come home without him. Wow, Louie seems kinda mad.
Oh! Oh my goodness! No way. This right here. This is an egg salad sandwich. It's about 20,000 Pokos. We're going to be swimming in it.
Now in order to plunder more treasure, the president has decided to come along as well. With the final area of the game having the most difficult dungeons, we're able to find Louie trapped with the game's final boss, with the game oddly implying that Louie may have been controlling the boss the whole time. And wow, I really hate this boss fight. Not only does this dungeon require many returns to collect treasures, but getting to the 14th floor with enough troops is very frustrating. Like I really hate this floor here. The water makes it so you can really only use blue Pikmin here to do much of anything, and they've already repeated this floor several times in the other dungeons. The final boss also wants you to fight it with several kinds of Pikmin to fight it, and this part is completely ridiculous. I lost so many of my Pikmin because of this. The electricity instantly kills any Pikmin that aren't yellow, the water can hit Pikmin that you've hidden far away, and both fire and poison can stun lock you while your Pikmin are being killed and you're unable to whistle them back to normal. And no, you cannot switch captains while stun locked. My strategy to this was to bring a majority of red Pikmin since they cannot be killed by fire from stun locked, and most of the time I can save them from poison or water. The biggest trouble was the electricity. It will come out quickly or it will come out slowly. I do not know if there's a visual cue as to which will come out. Since you attack the monster in sections in order to remove its item, I would always make a beeline for the electric part, since the other parts had a low chance of wiping out my whole army. And if I was hit with a fast electric move, or was clumsy around the slow one, I would just save scum with a soft reset from the Wii home menu, since the game saves your progress between floors. Something I didn't know was a concept until the end of the game. Sure, the boss fight is kinda cool, but it really isn't something I want to ever experience again. Now an actually cool dungeon was the Submerged Castle. Firstly, you cannot reach this dungeon with anything but blue Pikmin. The charm of the dungeon is the Water Wraith. This rolling boss will crash down after 5 minutes into your dungeon and pursue you and your troops throughout the floor. It will crush anything and everything in its path, and if you're resourceful, you'll be able to quickly manage to get to the next floor unscathed. I was very unnerved the first time I encountered this guy. Him hunting you down puts a lot of pressure on you since you're completely unable to harm him. I actually managed to get stun locked by this guy until I died once. When you reach the boss floor, you'll be able to turn in some of your Pikmin for purple Pikmin. The Water Wraith is weak to being stunned, which makes him vulnerable to other Pikmin. It's very satisfying to lay into this guy after being hounded relentlessly. I really love this dungeon, and I wish we saw more overall dungeon themes. And so what do I feel this game needs overall to be a better experience than Pikmin 1? Firstly, there's far too many dungeons. They frankly are too similar, and lack much more than them increasing the difficulty with more enemies. I'd like if the game was shorter and had better small experiences. Part of Pikmin 1's charm is its replayability. I'd love to replay Pikmin 1 for an evening and finish most if not all of the game, but Pikmin 2 is far too long for me to ever want to return for a single playthrough. At least, not for another decade anyways. I also would have loved a more fleshed out overworld with more to traverse and more puzzles. When we first arrived at the perplexing pool area, I was amazed at the scope of the level we might get to experience. And honestly, this level is the closest the game comes to what I envisioned for a proper sandbox to explore. The other areas of the game are more fitted to be a hub world, and this map kinda makes for a nice mix of the two. Apparently most of the areas of this game are areas that are very similar to the first game, just slightly altered with different obstacles and objectives. News to this game is multiplayer. It features a versus arena where the goal is to manage your Pikmin in order to carry either 4 neutral marbles back to your base or gather your opponent's colored marble. It's super fun, I'm just really bad at it. My friend who's already played before beat me 8 out of 10 times. Funny thing is, this is where I learned you're able to carry bomb rocks. I spent the entirety of Pikmin 2 thinking there's something yellows can't carry anymore, because Pikmin just attack them. Plus I think this game is completely void of any walls that need to be blown up. I also learned that the ultra bitter spray is in fact not a repellent like I had assumed it was. It is in fact used to petrify enemies and turn them to stone. Had I known this, much of this game would have been much easier, since I never used it. The other multiplayer option is the challenge mode, which is also playable solo. We only did a few of these levels, but the goal is to find as much treasure in the exit for a high score. If you can complete this level without losing any Pikmin, you get a perfect ranking. If you manage to get a perfect rank on each and every level, you'll be treated to a hidden cutscene, revealing that Louie actually had eaten the entire shipment of the golden Pikmin carrots and plunged Hocotate Fright into debt. What a guy. I should mention that if you check your Wikipedia, Louie's notes on each creature give cooking advice on how to prepare the creature. If it is edible, that is.
I found something! I found something!
Excellent! No, put that back. That's like old photos. We don't need that.
Yeah.
That's stupid. Put it back.
The game is inside the cards. New e-reader for Game Boy Advance. Slide the cards to play some of your favorite games.
Lastly, I'd like to bring up the e-reader functionality with the Japanese version of this title. At the time of this game's release, the e-reader was doing well in Japan, but was already a hard failure in other regions. Unfortunately, this means that getting these Pikmin e-cards is actually quite challenging. Not only do you need to actually find all these cards to play the minigames that this enables, but you will need a Japanese copy of Pikmin, a Japanese e-reader plus, and a Japanese GameCube due to region locking. The Game Boy Advance and the cable are region free, so that's no big deal. And no, I already tried. There is no way to play these over an emulator. And even if there is, it's certainly not an easy option. Hopefully someone can archive all these cards properly someday, so I reached out to Graham of the channel FossileArcade to lend me his footage. There is a link in the description to his video if you'd like to see a more in-depth look at the games. There are 3 different minigames that can be played: plucking Pikmin, marching Pikmin, and connecting Pikmin. The plucking Pikmin minigame involves you plucking different Pikmin colors from the ground behind you. You must avoid letting them block your path to other sprouts, as well as not allowing them to land on a hazard that could damage their type. The marching Pikmin minigame involves moving different types of Pikmin in tandem. By moving a Pikmin into, say, a rock, you can have one stay in place while the others move forward, all while correctly avoiding monsters or your Pikmin's type hazards. The last minigame is connecting Pikmin. Basically what you need to do is switch different directional tiles so your Pikmin can make it to the Hocotate Express. Think of it like the old Pipe Dream game. I should mention that each piece can only be moved once, and that you'll again have to avoid enemies and hazards. Overall, I think these games all look pretty fun, and I think I would enjoy plucking Pikmin the most. It's too bad these never saw another release. Nintendo's been sitting on a pack of games they could have charged a few bucks for and thrown onto the DSi eShop or even the 3DS. I'm sure one day we'll see these again in some form or another. So naturally, I played this version of Pikmin 2 on the Wii, which of course supported the upgraded Wii remote controls that just improved the game tenfold. We had received the Wii version of Pikmin 1 in like 2008 here in the US, but we didn't get Pikmin 2 until like 2012, 3 years after it was released into the rest of the world. I kind of wonder how well this print did, since Nintendo did release it as a part of their Nintendo Selects line. It's a real shame. I actually did enjoy Pikmin 2, just not as much as the far shorter Pikmin 1. Overall, the Pikmin and Olimar have much better control and feel more fluid as Olimar directs his troops. Way less drowning reds. I'll give the game credit since it does make yellows actually have more use in combat than the first game, not to mention they're both absolutely beautiful GameCube and Wii games. They're both very polished experiences, with a well done music score to top it all off. I'm glad to have tried and played through all of this game, and I'm looking forward to Pikmin 3. Let's take a quick sidetrack to some other Pikmin media in the meantime. Let's see, there was a really weird tech demo in 2003 called Stage Debut, where players could use the e-reader and the camera to import faces into the game. It's really bizarre to look at. It definitely looks like it had some influence on a few of Nintendo's later games, most notably Tomodachi Life. Anyways, I bring this up only because Olimar and a red Pikmin were reported to have been seen interacting in the game. Apparently the game was reported to be in development in some form or another way back in 2008 still, so it's nice that we were eventually able to have Tezuka dance with us in Tomodachi Life. I guess some other things to note on were some Animal Crossing furniture and some brief appearances of Mario Golf, but that's here nor there. In 2008, we saw Olimar and the Pikmin included in Smash Bros. Brawl, and they've been included ever since. This was my first introduction to our dear Captain Olimar, but I was so confused when Captain Falcon saved him from the giant Rob, and then killed most of his Pikmin in the process. Anyways, my next memorable thing was probably when Nintendo used the Pikmin to represent transferring your data from the Wii to the new Wii U, as well as transferring between 3DS systems. Adorable. Oh, wow, 2012 was a big year for Pikmin. Even got the E3 reveal of a new game. This is when Miyamoto showed off these cute animated shorts he made for Pikmin. They're very high quality and are pretty entertaining. And I don't know if many of you played this, but there's also Nintendo Land for the Wii U. In Pikmin Adventure, one of you gets to play as Olimar on the tablet, and the other 4 get to play as different Pikmin colors. The first half isn't the most challenging, and it's made for kids to enjoy. But the latter half of the game involves more awareness and using the proper colored Pikmin. I really enjoyed this game mode, and my friends and I played it much more than you'd expect. After a 9-year drought for a new entry in the series, Pikmin fans finally received a new entry in Pikmin 3. The story begins with our explorers leaving their planet Kopai in order to find new edible food sources, having depleted their planet of their own resources. Apparently their species is known for traveling to a new planet once depleting their current one, so they can master space travel, but they cannot make a garden in their backyards. Anyways, we join Alf, Charlie, and Brittany as they visit good old PNF 404 to save their home planet. It's interesting to note that these guys are not the same species as Olimar and Louie the Hawkatations, as they have anatomy differences and PNF 404's oxygen is toxic to Hawkatations, while the Kopai just can't tolerate the high amounts of it. But they do share the same language, similar technology, and stature, so they're likely not that different and probably share the same origins. Moving on arrival to the distant planet, the explorers manage to face another iconic crash landing, separating our 3 heroes across the land. Alf, Brittany, and Charlie must rescue each other with the help of their amassed Pikmin. Along the way, they collect different kinds of fruits that they use for creating food rations, as well as a storage of seeds to bring home to save their planet. Unfortunately, they've lost their cosmic drive key, a tool needed to leave the planet and get home to Kopai. While exploring, we come across many log entries that serve as little guides and tutorials to help you manage within the world. Among those entries, there are notes made by Captain Olimar. Apparently, he's found your cosmic drive key and you must find him quickly, lest your juice rations run dry. I always loved finding these log entries. Sure, most of them are useless, but they're all placed randomly but discreetly, as Olimar's system keeps dropping them due to the cheap nature of his boss. One in particular even nods to the bad ending of Pikmin 1, where Olimar is absorbed by an onion. Anyways, we must explore day by day, searching for clues while finding fruit in order to reach Olimar. We actually come across and save Louie, who our crew believes is Olimar. When Louie wakes up, his appetite gets the better of him and he runs off with our entire collection of food. After some more exploring, Louie is saved from a monster with a hunger almost as large as his. We are directed to where Olimar is currently trapped, the formidable oak. Honestly, this thing looks like one of those termite mounds you would see in Australia. It's imposing and mysterious. At the top, we see a golden creature watching over Olimar. When we arrive, we scare off the creature, but we realize that we cannot escape through the path we came with Olimar's sleeping body. Brittany will escort the Pikmin carrying Olimar to the exit, while Charlie and Alf will deal with obstacles and the strange creature. This monster, the Plasma Wraith, will chase you relentlessly throughout the oak. I just want to mention that its forms look extremely similar to Gulix from Pikmin 1, as well as the second form appearing like the Water Wraith from Pikmin 2. In fact, this entire section expands on the dungeon design of the submerged castle in Pikmin 2. I honestly didn't find it as tense as I feel it should, since I would just have Brittany repeat the same circle while I had the other 2 captains set up a path for her to follow. After we're tested and use all of our Pikmin types reliably, we finally reach the exit. In a fit of rage, the creature turns back into its wraith form and rampages around the area after abducting Olimar again. You must cast a barrage of Pikmin into the monster to cause it to leave blobs of itself all over the ground. Sending over Pikmin to destroy those blobs will cause them to be removed and the wraith unable to reabsorb them. The more the Wraith is eaten away, the smaller and less health it has. At some point, it will throw elemental attacks that can be destroyed with different Pikmin types. Upon its defeat, it will free Olimar and flee. When Olimar comes to, he will give you the Cosmic Drive key as thanks and apologizes for Louie's misbehavior. The crew gratefully offers to take the Huckatations home on the way back. As well, their ship had been destroyed, which I'm pretty glad to have seen the last of that annoying ship. With the Saviors of the Kopai returning home with fruit seeds, we'll see if they're able to cultivate any of their bounty. And, well, maybe their planet will learn from their mistakes. Hopefully. Okay, so let's compare stats. The first time I finished this game, it was completed in about 11.5 hours. I found 41 fruits and finished on the 37th day. But that's not all there is to do. Getting the best ending, I finished on day 50, with all 66 fruits in about 15 total hours. Now this is a massive time difference between Pikmin 2, which was a 40-hour experience. So I played the game again. This time I was able to finish in about 6 hours, ending on the 20th day with only 22 total fruits. This speaks volumes about the game's replayability. If you want a basic playthrough, you can finish the game quickly and it won't consume that much of your time. If you're a Pikmin fanatic, you can finish very fast if you know the most optimal way to do things. Since different fruits become varying amounts of juice, and you can sustain your Pikmin count very well in this game. So if you're great at micromanaging, you can likely get this game done in half of, or rather quarter of the time I spent. And that's all designed without being a speedrunner. Apparently the record for this game is down to less than 50 minutes for any percent.
Hey, Olimar, this is your president. I hope you've been bringing back lots of treasure. We gotta pay off this Poco debt something fierce, okay? And,
Daniel Henry David Thoreau!
Please take care of Louis for me, okay? Don't get worried.
It can go off the table.
It's tiny! Look! Wow. This is amazing.
No, not the gamepad. Not the gamepad. Do you have a name?
I wonder if they grow.
Do you grow?
Oh, he's getting back up.
He's okay.
Okay, so you guys know the deal. Your goal is to control an army of Pikmin in order to solve various terrain puzzles as well as collect objects and defeat enemies. As you defeat enemies, you'll grind more Pikmin. And I don't want to cramp too much on Pikmin 2 because I feel it's still a great game, but a massive gripe that I had was that a huge amount of the combat doesn't translate into more Pikmin. All the enemies that you kill, and if you decide to collect them, they only turn to more Pokos for your overall score. None of the dungeon enemies equal a larger Pikmin swarm, and in the game where I spent most of my time in the dungeons, I had to leave very often to grind for more Pikmin. While in Pikmin 3, however, all killed creatures turn to more Pikmin. Even the boss enemies can be dragged back to the Onion, which I feel was a fantastic touch. And finally, they've embraced the massive and flashy boss design that I feel this series needed. The creatures really remind you of your diminutive stature, especially the monsters like the Quaggled Myreclops. When you arrive, our explorers hypothesize that the XX oxygen has caused the creatures to grow to massive size, but in reality the team is just very tiny, since this planet is still very much implied to be a post-humanity Earth. While Pikmin 2 made this clear with all the treasures you can find, Pikmin 3 goes even further by making the levels you choose to take place on different continents. However, this takes place so long in the future that continental drift has moved all the continents around. So Australia and Antarctica are the tropical maps, South America is the marshland, Indonesia as a tundra, and India like an Australian desert. Honestly, I really enjoy the map design. I think it blends the first two Pikmin very well together. Pikmin 1 maps are very open and usually can explore them in any direction you choose, and Pikmin 2's overworld generally follows this rule, albeit not as much. Then Pikmin 2's dungeon are very much literal randomized tunnels that you must navigate. Yes, you can usually go whichever way you want, but I often found myself doing my best just to get to the exit each time, and not doing any exploring that usually comes with open-ended routes. Anyways, mostly all of Pikmin 3's maps can be freely explored in any direction you wish, but they definitely have that tunnel style that much of Pikmin 2's dungeons has. And then this circles back to what I've noticed as Pikmin's biggest map design trend: give the player blue Pikmin last. Each of the Pikmin games do this. All the Pikmin but blues are extremely vulnerable to drowning, and water makes for a very natural environmental hazard. So by making blue Pikmin the last Pikmin available, you can make levels that effectively multiply in size for the player to come back to and explore further. This is exactly why yellows were given more utility in the second and third installments. Their use is only needed in the first game for blowing up walls. You can tank all enemies with a ton of red and blue Pikmin, while the second game puts more effort into requiring yellows for combat. Then also backseats purple and whites as less required Pikmin instead, and only makes them available from their respective candy pop buds in dungeons, which then kinda makes them more special and something you should covet and protect. So let's talk more Pikmin. The types of Pikmin available have stayed the same. As you know, reds do 1.5 damage and are fire resistant. Blues are unable to drown, but are now unable to save Pikmin from the water in Pikmin 3. Not that I've ever really used this in the first two games. Yellows are immune to electricity and can be thrown, but are no longer the only Pikmin that can carry bomb rocks. It's something that all Pikmin can do. I think that's a welcome change as we already couldn't use bombs like this in Pikmin 2. New to this game are both rock Pikmin and winged Pikmin. Rock Pikmin, well, look like rocks. They're good for smashing crystals and breaking glass walls. It's best to throw them to do burst damage since it cannot lash on like other Pikmin to do damage over time. As for winged Pikmin, I will not be calling them that since that name is dumb. To me, they're either pink or fairy Pikmin. Obviously, their main staple is their ability to fly, but do the least damage. I really enjoyed these guys the most, and I love having them around. They take their own path back to the Onion and SS Drake, so you don't always have to worry about them interacting with the train or some enemies, which is exactly why they've included spiderwebs in some locations, so you can't just send out the pinks and forget about them. Oh, and one cool touch I want to bring up. The Onions become one combined entity when you leave the planet's surface for the day. It makes for a very quick and convenient method for taking out Pikmin. They've all got their own little charm when you free them too. The rock onion is trapped in a crystal, the yellow onion is found in a cave but comes to life when there's light and you see lots of electricity sparking from it, implying that the onions can use photosynthesis to survive but needs nutrients to make larger amounts of Pikmin quickly. The blue onion is found in a shallow pool of water and can only be pulled out by pink Pikmin, and the pink onion is found trapped in a spiderweb. I really love that when you free the pink onion, it flutters around in the panic briefly before spinning its petals normally like the other onions. It really drives its theme home. But wait, where are the white and purple Pikmin? They're in the game's manual and they're on the cover art. Reggie, have you forsaken me?
I feel just like a purple Pikmin.
Nah, they've been relegated to this game's challenge mode. All the Pikmin still function the same, with white Pikmin's speed and poison immunity and purple being the best at carrying objects and doing 3 times damage plus a stun burst. I really don't mind them being in the challenge mode. Nintendo probably felt that them being in the main game would clutter up the maps and would likely have extended the development time, which I'm fine with. Speaking of the challenge mode, their approach is very similar to that of Pikmin 2. In fact, if you enjoyed Pikmin 2, this is where Pikmin 3 is the most similar, with ranking and mission structure having some variations. You even get to play as Olimar or Louie for some of them. While the general focus of Pikmin 2's challenge mode was to collect all the treasures and escape the dungeon without losing Pikmin, if anything, Pikmin 2 excels at taking advantage of its limited file capacity. Pikmin 3's challenge mode has 3 types: collect treasure, battle enemies, and defeat bosses. The main goal of all 3 is to complete the objective with losing the least amount of Pikmin possible. Collect treasure wants you to obtain all fruits and treasures in order to bring them back to the Drake. You can also bring back enemies for extra points or on some maps to sprout more Pikmin, but most maps already have a lot of Pikmin scattered around the map for you to whistle over. Battle enemies is exactly how it sounds. Your goal is to defeat as many creatures as possible for your score. You will need to bring them back for your onion to sprout more Pikmin. And the final option is defeat bosses. It's exactly as it sounds. Use your allotted Pikmin to defeat them, and your score is determined by your time and Pikmin count. These modes are fine in single player, but they're much more fun if you play co-op. I invited my friend over and we had a good time trying to get high scores. Unfortunately, the game did start to chug and slow down when we were fighting bosses like the Scornet Maestro. And while Nintendo has never really submerged into paid downloadable content for a majority of their titles of the last decade, with games like Mario Kart 8, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, New Super Mario Bros. U, Super Smash Bros. U, and Hyrule Warriors, a few months after its release, Pikmin 3 received 3 DLC packs priced at a total of about 9 dollars. The first pack was stages 7 through 10 for collect treasure. Pack 2 was 7 through 10 of battle enemies, and Pack 3 is 12 through 15 for both of the modes, with stages 6 and 11 being included in a free update as a teaser. There isn't much to go into with these. They're for people who really like Pikmin. They're meant for people that enjoy this game far more than casual playthroughs. You could argue that they should have released more new maps for the main game, but honestly, that would have required more development than you'd expect, and at that point, they may as well work on designing the next entry in the series. I actually cannot find the DLC for this game online on Nintendo's eShop website, nor can I find this DLC by searching on the Wii U eShop. I can only find it through Pikmin 3's challenge mode menu. I don't know if this means that Nintendo has somewhat delisted this DLC with the intention of eventually porting the game to the Switch, but watch them announce it after I publish this video. And can I just mention real quick how awful the Wii U store options are? The deluxe release of this console only has 32GB of internal flash memory inside of it. The front SD card is purely for image storing and for Wii menu data. They want you to plug in a flash drive or an external hard drive into the USB slots of the console, which is a huge pain because when they're plugged in, they become the default install location for all data, meaning all game saves, update data, full games, etc. are directed to be stored there. You cannot direct a file location when downloading, and you cannot make presets in an option menu as to where certain types of data should go. All you can do is move the files from one location to another very slowly in the file storage menu. Or if you're like me, just unplug the storage device and then install and launch your games for the first time without it. I'm a Wii U apologist and I do actually enjoy the console. However, I have so many gripes with the thing I'll have to save for another video. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure when to bring this up, but Pikmin 3 features a robust amount of options for control, and all three work very well. Firstly, the game was intended and designed to be played with the gamepad sitting on your lap. Well, the coffee table in my instance. And you using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck in your hands. You don't press any buttons on the Wii U gamepad. You use the touchscreen to see the map, check the logbook, and see your current stats. You can also use the touchscreen to direct your captains to different locations with their Pikmin, while you can control your current captain with your main focus. Honestly, having 3 captains and using this function really improves on Pikmin 2's 2-captain system when it comes to solving puzzles and managing Pikmin. Although I do wish I could have automated it even further from the gamepad, as stopping to direct for any every 20 seconds or so when avoiding the plasma rays and trying to manage obstacles is kind of annoying. Otherwise, it's a cool feature. The Wii Remote and Nunchuck options I feel are the best, but that's because I came from playing the Wii ports of Pikmin 1 and 2. They are more refined and improved from the previous entries. Playing with the gamepad in front of you is how you play multiplayer. You both share it on, say, a coffee table, and you both use a Wii Remote and Nunchuck or Pro Controller. The second option is for the gamepad and its touchscreen, or Pro Controller and gamepad for the touchscreen. You may do all the functions of the Wii Remote and gamepad, however the Pikmin throwing has a few caveats. You can move normally with the left stick, but Pikmin are harder to throw while moving at the same time. You may press down a button in order to keep your leader in place while you throw in any direction, which is fine for many tasks. But you cannot throw Pikmin independently while moving in a different direction. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but I hope my footage is communicating my point well enough. I'm not a fan of it, but people coming from the GameCube releases of Pikmin 1 and 2 likely to prefer this option the most. One feature not present in either other control variants is that you're able to move the camera freely with the right stick. They only let you snap the camera behind the player with the Z button. In fact, the Wii Remote has removed the previous title's ability to zoom the camera in and out with the D-pad entirely, and has given the player a roll move to dodge left and right that I've never really used effectively in the game anyways. And the third control option is a merger of sorts that was added in the game's final update. You control the player with the left side of the gamepad and can aim and throw Pikmin with the touchscreen. A few buttons are placed on the touchscreen like the dismiss button, but it's mostly the same as the Wii Remote option. The gamepad's usual functions are accessed in a second layer that you switch to, kind of like a sub-menu. I played a good chunk of a second playthrough in this manner, and I feel it's just as good of a way to play as the others. In fact, all of them are very good at catering to different types of players, so I'm very happy Nintendo gave us so many options. The other feature I wasn't sure where to include is the Battle Bingo game mode. It plays a lot like the 2-player battle from Pikmin 2. While the object of Pikmin's 2 versus was to collect 3 marbles or their marble, Pikmin 3 wants you to obtain either a fruit, a monster, or a marble and bring it back to your base. Then it gives you a respective mark for the item on your bingo sheet. The sheets, items, stage variations, etc. all randomized per stage. It really doesn't get dull very quickly. I should mention that the primary way of messing with your opponent is to collect cherries. Much like Pikmin 2, the wheel gives you a random item that ranges from moderately helpful to extremely impactful to the game. Most of the time, one of us would roll a Rocks Fall item that would kill huge amounts of our Pikmin, which would cripple us for the rest of the match. Aside from the item being very overpowered, the rest of the game mode is very fair. It even includes different options if you want to change the experience, such as playing with 2 captains each, which I wasn't the best at doing, playing with a macaroon turned on, which is very much like having an instant win option like in Pikmin 2, or even variations in your starting Pikmin count. My buddy and I played through this way more than we had expected. Like, I turned off the capture recording when I knew I had enough, and we just kept playing for another 3 hours. I suppose my only major gripe would have to be how the secret memos were handled. Somewhat hidden throughout the game are memos with a number on them. These 10 numbers make up a random code that can be entered elsewhere. Where, you may ask? What Miyamoto intended the player to do was to see his post on the now defunct Miiverse. Go to the link he shared in your Wii U internet browser and enter your code on the website. You're still able to access this website on your Wii U, just not from Miiverse. The website will play one of 5 different log videos of Olimar giving a status report on each of the game's stages. There's also a hidden log by Louis after he steals from you and before he's captured by the Meyerclops. But this was never released and was only found by investigating along with the inspect element function in a browser. I really don't feel that this feature needs to be included on the website. It should have been cutscenes in the game or some kind of extra bonus unlock. In fact, they look more like advertisements or promos that the company would have uploaded to their social media pages. Maybe that was the original purpose, because they didn't come out until sometime after the game was released. If anything, this won't be a hindrance to the game one day if the website is taken down and the game isn't ported to the Switch. I mean, this is of what, 3 Wii U games that haven't already been really released for the Switch? Pikmin 3 is my definitive Pikmin experience, and it's my favorite entry thus far. Every moment, I was extremely impressed with the design and the presentation of each chapter of the game, of which my opinions were only improved on recurring visits and playthroughs. This game took about 9 years of development time between the series entries, and it's been almost 7 years now since 3. Miyamoto had stated in an interview that Pikmin 4 was actually almost finished back in 2015, and from what I've heard, Pikmin fans have been fervently expecting some kind of news to be released sooner or later. But with Miyamoto at the helm, there's no telling what could possibly happen. The games have never been a huge system seller, and I imagine Nintendo's waiting for a good time to release it, since sometimes it seems Nintendo does release games for the good of their image. If they only care about profits alone, they would probably only release games for their core pillar franchises. But making cheaper games for more niche markets does still turn a profit. But we'll still likely never see another F-Zero title. Actually, before we finish, I happen to have one last budget title to discuss.
Hey. Louie, where are you? I need your help.
No, I'm here at the Wawa.
A Wawa? What the heck is that?
It's like a 7-Eleven, but better.
What?
Like they have hoagies.
Did you go back to
coffees.
Arcade?
Do you want some?
No, what are you doing to me?
Hello?
Stop this at once!
Omar, I can't hear you over top of all the screaming. Guys, let me know if you need a quesadilla, man.
Once again, we find our hero, Captain Olimar, on a journey in space before crash landing on a mysterious planet. After recovering, he searches the area and discovers that he has once again come across the helpful Pikmin creatures. Our ship, the SS Dolphin 2, informs us that we're going to need something called Sparklium. Sparklium basically serves the same purpose as Pokos from Pikmin 2. To keep it short, Olimar must travel through the 8 worlds and collect 30,000 Sparklium in order to go home. But not only that, he must also obtain the necessary ship part from the final boss in order to leave. After leaving what I assume is PNF 404 yet again, Olimar returns home to Planet Hakate. Okay, I cannot stress how much I want to get through this part. This game is extremely boring. Like, holy moly, it's a drag. Imagine the general treasure collecting formula from Pikmin 2 and make it 2D. Bing bang boom, print and release it. It does some cool things with the pink Pikmin of gliding, but it's really the only novel thing it does. I guess the larger thing of note is the little cutscenes you see extremely frequently. You see, the Pikmin will be playing around with the environment, messing around with each other, or getting into trouble. And I guess, honestly, that makes this the game that gives the Pikmin the most personality. But if anything, it makes it more gruesome when I send them to their deaths. I really must stress that this gets very old very fast, and you cannot skip these little cutscenes if you haven't seen them do it already. At least, some of them teach you by including gameplay mechanics for the upcoming area. New to the game is the Pikmin Park. Basically, you collect Pikmin from each level and bring them there to send over to do their respective tasks. This is a nice distraction, but it seems like it progresses as you beat levels. So you can't just turn off the game and come back later to do some progress. But I should mention that this game isn't bad. It's not a bad game whatsoever. Like if Pikmin 3 were a 9 out of 10, Hey Pikmin is easily a 6 or a 7. It's well designed and it plays very well. I just don't like it because I'm not 6 years old anymore. I feel like people compare this game far too much to the other games in the series. It came out in 2017, at the tail end of the 3DS's lifespan. It's likely it was made for kids on Nintendo 2DS lines of systems. I didn't mention it because it wasn't important, but Hey Pikmin doesn't include 3D support at all, which 3D is something Nintendo writes on the cover of their games not to enable for children under 7. I don't know. I just feel if I got this game instead of Rugrats Castle Capers on my GBA in 2001, I'd be elated to play. I guess one thing to praise is the boss design. I actually liked fighting the bosses because they offered some variation in the gameplay and they generally looked pretty neat. Especially because this game doesn't move beyond just mindlessly collecting trinkets for Sparklium. At some point, I figured I had enough points to stop going out of my way to collect them and just picking them up as I see them. Since, well, you can't beat the game without the final part, which is at least 8 hours of game to work through. At the time, big in gaming was the Toys to Life market, little figures that you could use to activate a character in game or to get little goodies, such as Skylanders, Webkins, Disney Infinity, and then Nintendo figures. Starting with Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U, you could scan figures into your game and train them as AI fighters. There were a huge range of uses for these figures from game series to game series, but the Nintendo Amiibo line has always been a fun one to collect for. You were usually getting them for the character figure and not always for the benefit of the NFC aspect. Since the trend for Nintendo started in 2014, Pikmin 3 came out too soon to have supported any kind of figures, and Nintendo seems to really hate updating their games past a year of release. So for the 2017 release of Hey Pikmin, you could scan either the Super Smash Bros. Olimar figure or the new Pikmin figure to instantly acquire more Pikmin for your troop. I really didn't ever see the need for this, but it's a cool idea for kids, I guess. You can also scan any of the Super Mario, Animal Crossing, or Splatoon amiibos to unlock them as treasures in the game. I think the Pikmin amiibo lets you unlock a random one each day, so you don't have to actually own all these amiibo. They don't do anything other than grant more Sparklium and give them cute descriptions in your logbook. Oh, right! They brought back the Pikipedia from Pikmin 2. Here you can scroll through your log entries on the Pikmin types, the amiibos, and the end. What? I'm not offended like some other people may be when it comes to Hey Pikmin. They tried something and I don't feel like it did overly well. Pikmin has always been a niche series for Nintendo, but maybe this game could serve as a gateway game for the rest of the series. Like give kids a reason to look into whatever release of Pikmin they consider later down the line. Functionally, the game works. It meets the critical of effectively being a handheld game about Pikmin, with short bursts of gameplay that you can pick up from time to time, while being a game that will hold a child's attention. You're better off skipping this one. Hey Pikmin is a game that exists, but only barely. So yeah, that's Pikmin. The stellar, interstellar exploration RTS that changes the way you think about your vegetables. This project had a much larger scope than I expected, and I ended up putting way more work into it than I thought I would. But I really enjoyed playing through this series, and I think you can get a lot out of playing through the first 3 entries. At the time of writing, you can go into the Wii U eShop and pick up all 3 for $60 total. I'd say that's pretty worth the money. Granted, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Pikmin 3 port announcement for Nintendo Switch sooner or later. Here's hoping for news on Pikmin 4 sometime soon. This has been Saffron. Thanks for listening.